and welcome back to another episode of Green Jeans. I am your one co-host, Annika Van Rossum, using pronouns she, her, joined by my other co-host,
Maya Van Rossum, also using the pronouns she, her.
And if you couldn't tell by our last names, we are a mother-daughter duo because we are related because our last names are Van Rossum. And this podcast is talking about environmental and social justice issues through a generational lens because somehow, some way, I am still fighting many of the same issues my mom was raising the alarm bells about many years ago when she first became an activist. So that's what we're here. That's what we're about. Mom, do you want to introduce this week's topic?
I do. So, Annika, knowing that you have been very immersed in law school exams in the last couple of weeks, we wanted to pick a hot topic that maybe wasn't national news hot, but is a hot topic in environmental circles and is a topic that I think that you have quite a bit of experience with and have thought about. Yes. Because of your childhood, joining both your mother and your father volunteering in wildlife rehabilitation. In fact, you were almost an infant, maybe a toddler, when you went to the Mercer County Wildlife Rehab Center with your dad. And you've gone with me to some wildlife centers. And so literally grew up with some touch in this field, which I'm sure you'll talk a little bit about. So it seemed like a good topic. Again, not a high national news topic, but it is a hot topic in a number of wildlife circles. And you say, wildlife rehabilitation, how could that possibly be a hot topic? Like, who could be opposed to that? Well, actually, there are a number of issues of concern to some, and I'm going to just highlight two of them. One is a controversy about whether or not people should actually intervene when they see distressed wildlife, or is it better to let Mother Nature take its course and I guess weed out the weaklings? And another is an issue of speciesism, and the thought by some that some species are worthy of extra care and help, and other species are too common to be worthy of help when they're in distress. So these are the two hot topics we're going to touch on.
Yeah, and I think honestly, like speciesism, I can never say it right, is like always a hot topic in the sense of like it's constantly getting brought up. And I think, as you guys have heard us talk about in like past episodes, with like our vegetarian journey, it really is like the whole issue around vegetarianism, veganism is like, why do we, besides like the planet issue, is like, why do we view pigs and cows and chickens as different and worthy of like less care than dogs and cats and other animals that we deem as pets? So I think speciesism is always a hot topic, but yes, so I'm really excited.
Yeah, and we being not you and I, we being people, people's thinking that the pigs and the cows and the chickens should be treated differently.
Yes,
just for clarity. So I thought on the first piece of the hot topic, this, wanted to look a little bit about this issue of human intervention. But I do want people, I thought, Annika, maybe it would be helpful for people to understand a little bit about wildlife rehabilitation and how it's different than just medical care for animals.
Oh, yeah.
So there are a lot of animal vets, and they do lots of good work. Wildlife rehabilitators, they generally, at least in my experience, where I volunteered, and I think where you volunteered, Annika, there is a veterinarian that is involved in different levels when there's need for surgery or extra care, but that the wildlife rehabilitators themselves aren't necessarily veterinarians, but they have gone through special training and gotten a special wildlife rehabilitation license. So they know a lot about a lot of animals. They know about their feeding, they know about their care, and are very engaged from the second they get an animal till the second an animal is released. And in addition to the schooling that's different and the licensing that's different, a veterinarian sort of intervenes to give care when there's a problem. They might give surgery or look it over and prescribe medication. Whereas the wildlife rehabilitator really takes the animal in and treats the sick and injured animal all the way, again, from the moment they come in until their release. And the goal of release is that an animal will only be let back into the wild when it can, I'm just going to read this, it can function in their natural habitats as normal members of their species. So it's not medical care and you're gone. It's treatment and bringing an animal through that full circle of medical care and back to, I guess, normalcy.
Yeah, I mean, it's more than like, when you bring and I guess it's easy for people too, like think about when you bring your dog in with a broken leg, like, yeah, the vet treats it, but then you're the one that takes the dog home and helps make sure like the food is easily accessible, that if they have to get medication, it gets treated. And like, if your dog needs PT, I'm taking my friend for surgery this whole week to get PT on her leg. So like, she's been getting rehabbed. So just like, yeah, like an owl that's had a broken leg and has bandages all over it. Now you're not just like, okay, fly away. Like it has to still be fed. It has to get the medication, has to go through everything. So yeah, I think that's a perfect way to put it.
So, but there are some people who think when there's an injured animal in the wildlife, like you should say, bummer for you, and walk away.
What?
What? So here's a story. I'm just going to read a little bit of this story that was in National Geographic a few years ago. Just a few paragraphs, and maybe this is a big example of this problem, but I think lays it out. So going down, I guess it begins that the title is "To Rescue or Not." That is the question with distressed animals. Maybe it's a baby robin that falls out of the nest in the backyard, or perhaps twin deer fawns left orphaned after their mother gets struck by a car or eaten by wolves, or perchance a bald eagle behaving strangely, staggering on the road and unable to fly. When wild animals appear to be in distress, should humans intervene to rescue them? And then it goes on. This existential question is being debated following a recent, and I'm knocking out a few words, by the way, following a recent incident in Yellowstone National Park involving a bison. Here, a Canadian tourist in Yellowstone National Park captured a wild bison calf with his bare hands and loaded it into his SUV. The man said he found the animal alone and shivering along the roadside in Yellowstone's wildlife-rich Lamar Valley. Once he turned it over to rangers, park biologists made several attempts to reunite the youngster with its herd, but when the calf was rejected, they euthanized it. The gentleman who did the rescue was fined $110 for violating park regulations, which strictly forbid contact with wildlife. And then it just says that, the incident has ignited emotional exchanges on social media and beyond, people supporting and people condemning the gentleman for intervening.
I remember. Do you know why he did that? Why he took the bison?
No,
Did the
why?
article tell you? Because he thought it was cold.
Yeah, it says up there that it was cold and shivering. I think he thought it was abandoned.
Yeah. Okay.
He thought it was an abandoned baby, and he took it. And I guess your point's well taken. I mean, they don't go full. I don't think they really know. Was this actually an abandoned baby bison that this gentleman was helping, or as you seem to be suggesting, maybe it was just a baby bison doing natural baby things, and mama was around and the guy didn't see it. I get your point there.
I think the thing I didn't get was like, when I remember reading that when it came out, was like, I can understand. I mean, I can understand when being like, I'm worried about this baby that I see alone. But when he was like, I thought it was cold, and maybe this is my arrogance of like growing up a Nat Geo kid. It's like bison are built for the cold. That is what they do. Baby bison are born built for the cold. That's why they're in Yellowstone. So maybe that's like a little bit of arrogance on my part. But I
So what you're saying
understand.
is I shouldn't have read the story. I should have just read the headline and the opening paragraph about robins and deer.
No. I think it's a good story because it also is like there are instances where people don't help animals that are in need of help because there also comes to this like, well, it's a wild animal. And so like it will find a way to survive even with a broken leg or even if it's really cold and like some animal
Yeah.
and it's kind of the unfortunate of like people knowing what needs what. So I think I remember that
Yeah.
story. It's a good story.
I
No, it's
mean,
good.
it is well, and it is a reason why people should get educated, and it is a reason why if you see a wild animal that looks healthy, or perhaps maybe a little shivery, rather than immediately scoop it up, call the local wildlife rehab center, like have that number on speed dial, because it is true, right? When birds are learning to fly, they will often be on the ground and the parents are around, watching them and, protecting them and looking to help. But it's not necessarily that something is awry.
Yeah, like I
Um,
think like in this season we're in right now, which is where I'm like, yeah, I think people you should look it up before you do something necessarily is I just had even up here in Vermont, just had some friends take some baby bunnies out of a hole in their yard, put it in their home. They said, well, mom abandoned them because I haven't seen them come. And I'm like, well, mom's just coming when you're not around because she doesn't want to interact with you. So now you've done this whole thing. And I don't know enough about putting baby bunnies back in the hole because I've never done that because I know to leave them in the hole. So I said, here's the number, call the wildlife center and ask them, can you put the bunnies back or do you have to now bring them in because now mom won't take them? So like that, yeah, I think that's a good point too. Is like if you don't know, like call somebody,
call and
especially the
ask.
animal in your area.
Yeah. And there is, I mean, you're right. I mean, there is truth for some species to the idea that once you touch the animal and it has a human scent on it, mom is not going to come back. But there's also the old wives' tale. I mean, it is that for birds, actually, they don't really have a good sense of smell.
Mm-hmm.
And so actually, if you do genuinely have a baby bird that's fallen out of the nest, and you do see that like a hairless bird, generally, scooping it up and putting it back into the nest can be the right solution.
Yeah.
And the reason for the old wives' tale, as I understand it, that if you touch the bird, that it will immediately be rejected, is to get kids to not touch the animals, right? And sort of to tell them to stay away. But it may not necessarily be true with some species versus others. And I don't know what
I
it
don't know all them.
But I do want to say, Annika, one of the reasons why, when we were thinking about our topics, one of the reasons why this idea came to my mind is because I do think there's a lot of times when people might intervene prematurely, like
Mm-hmm.
your rabbit friend story, which actually is kind of weird. Like, I don't know. I mean,
I think my biggest shock, and this a slight bit of arrogance on my part, is that people are my friends and they don't ask me before they do stuff. I'm like, why wouldn't you? They're like, well, I didn't know what to do. I'm like, call me. I'll tell you what to do.
I know.
Like, I
It
just
is
told you to
kind
leave
of,
alone.
it is kind of crazy. But um, um, but there are also many times when clearly a person should intervene. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you hit an animal with your car, or you see an animal that has been hit by a car, and even then this question comes up, right? Like, should you just let nature take its course? Well, no, because that animal was hurt because of a person. And I want to like confess here. So I was driving to my morning workout and I hit a bird, and I was going a little bit too fast, and because I was in a rush, and I wasn't positive I had hit the bird. I looked in the rear view mirror and I think I did. And you have that split second of, I'm in a hurry, I should just go. And then it's like, no, the
Mm-hmm.
life of this animal is more important, whether I had hit it or somebody else, and I swooshed around and I went and I stopped my car partway in traffic, and I went out, right, and I rescued the bird, and it was breathing. It did not make it to the point of being able to take to a wildlife rehab center. But of course, I just felt horrible. And I just kept telling myself to forgive myself because I didn't have malice in my heart, but that I needed to learn the lesson.
Yeah.
In the early morning, right? Well, you shouldn't be speeding anyway, but particularly, right, this time of year, as you said, and in those morning and evening hours, like you really do need to be more mindful. And so the next day, I was running late again, and I was tempted to go fast, and I was like, no, I am not. And do you know what happened as a result of me learning the lesson because of that poor little bird that died the day before?
What?
Well, a little baby squirrel ran out into the road. And clearly it was a baby. It was very small and it didn't know what to do. It had never been in the road, I guess, before. And I was going so slow that I saw it and I was able to stop. And the squirrel ran back and forth for a little bit and then ran off the road. And then I drove on and I drove a little bit further down the road, continuing to maintain my speed, knowing that I was going to be late potentially. And guess what? 3 baby foxes ran out into the road and we're like ran in this little circle. But because I was driving slowly and being very mindful, I did not hit the 3 baby foxes. And then 2 days later, I've still continued to maintain my mindfulness about these creatures and not wanting to hurt another one. And guess what? A bird swooped in front of my car, but because I was going the speed limit, I was able to slam on the brakes and the bird swooshed away. So one, it's important to go back and take responsibility. And it can be really, really hard emotionally because you feel really bad. And there you will see the outcome of your behavior, whatever it is, right? And you will know that you hurt this animal and how badly, hopefully, you feel. On the other hand, leaving the bird to die cold, lonely, scared in the road as cars continue to drive by, how much more horrible is that? So at least the bird got scooped up, was put in a dark place, right? You and I both, for people, you might want to think about this, we keep a towel and a folded up box in our cars so that if we find animals, we can scoop them up and put them in that dark place, which is what they need. They need dark and calmness and warmth. So while the bird did die, at least it didn't die there with cars shooshing by, frightening it even more.
Yeah. I think that's the thing too for people, like, even if you can't like do anything, even just giving an animal, like, because it happens to everybody. It's happened to me. It's happened to you. Like, just a calming place to rest, I guess is how to put it, is like still very meaningful. And like, yeah, it's like you wouldn't leave a person, even like if somebody got hit by a car, even if you called 911 and the ambulance was on the way and you knew that person was going to die, like they're bleeding out, sorry if that's graphic for anyone, but like you would stay with that person so that they wouldn't be alone in their last moments. And so it's like, why would an animal be any different?
Now, on another note, my stepdaughter, your stepsister, got run over by a motorcycle and nearly died on the road. Thank goodness people were nearby and they did just drive away. And then a colleague of mine, her husband, was putting a sign out for a nonprofit event and a truck hit him literally and drove away. So actually there are shitty people who don't just leave animals, but leave people too.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't be that shitty person. And that animal, like we talked about, Annika, in some of our recent shows, those animals have emotions. Then maybe they're the same as people's, maybe they're not, but they feel fear and you can see it and you know it. It's why they run away. It's why they're trying not to fly into your car because they're afraid they're going to get hit and something bad is going to happen. So they do feel fear. And, you know, the least you can do is take responsibility or try, or when somebody else has done it. And of course, if you see a turtle crossing the road or you see a goose in the road, you have a responsibility. You're in a car, slow down, stop, and get the rest of traffic to stop.
Yeah.
You know?
I was going to say too, for people that don't know you, every year, without fail, somehow, some way, my mom driving down the road, at least one turtle every year crosses her car's path, and to the point where she stops like didn't you stop like a 5 highway lane of traffic one time for
I don't know
turtle?
if it was 5 lanes.
It was a lot. It wasn't like it wasn't like a one way though. It was like
No, it
multiple
was
lanes
2.
of
It was
traffic for
4. Yes, it was.
4. Okay, 5 or
I
4.
think it was like 2. Anyway, it was a lot.
But for when a turtle is crossing a road, you know this. When a turtle is crossing a road, don't take it. So if turtle's going this way for people, so if turtle's going forward, don't pull it back. Take the turtle, pick it up, and carry it the way it was going, because it's going to a body of water or wherever it's going. If you put it back, without fail, when you drive away, a second later, the turtle will go back in the road. So that's a little thing for people.
And if it's a snapping turtle, don't try to pick it up unless you know how to.
Yeah.
There is a way to pick up a snapping turtle where it cannot scooch around and snap you and break your finger.
Yeah.
And so I find snapping turtles rather frightening. And there was a time too when I stopped traffic because I wanted to shoosh the turtle across, and it was on the other lane, not the lane that I was in. So I sort of catty cornered my car around, and then people think you have a broken down car.
Yeah.
And I shooshed it. And once you can get the person coming the other way to stop, and I shooshed it off the road rather than pick it up because it was kind of big and it was frightening. And I did not want to get my finger snapped. But the thing is about the turtle story, before you were born, I remember it. There was one time I saw a turtle crossing the road. It was just 2-lane road, right? 1 lane each direction. And it was and it was going it was on the lane, not my lane. So I saw it. I realized what it was, right? Like sometimes you take a second to register what's going on. I pulled over to the side of the road. I ran back to where this turtle was. The turtle was on the yellow line, right? And there was a car coming, and I thought, okay, it's on the yellow line. It's going to be fine. I'll let that car go. And then I'll run and I'll get it, because the car was almost there. Do you know that fucking asshole ran over that turtle? And I just remember hearing the crack of the shell being run over, and I screamed at the top of my lungs. I can still, and I just remember like hunching down. I just remember the horror of thinking, here I had made it in time to this turtle, and it was going to be fine as soon as this one car went by, because then the other car was far enough off that I could stop it. And so that is one reason why I try. Don't always succeed, but I try not to hesitate, and I try to overcome my fear of stopping traffic.
Yeah.
Because that happened, and I was so close, and then it got crushed, and it was horrible.
People suck. Sorry. I remember there was a turtle, I think at Philadelphia Zoo, that we had to fuse together shell because like a car ran it over, which also, zoos are not wildlife rehab places, people. If you have yes, if you're in a big pinch and you are standing at the gates of the zoo and maybe they have a veterinarian that can help the wild animal you're with, maybe, but do not call a zoo. Do not take the animal to the zoo. If you have a pet that's an exotic animal that you no longer want to care for, do not take it to a zoo. They are not wildlife rehab. They do not do that stuff. There are wildlife rehab centers, or like call your local vet and see if they know, or call the zoo and ask if they know where. But a zoo is not a wildlife rehab center. It is not your drop-off place for unwanted pets. I remember so many times when I was interning at Philadelphia Zoo, I'd walk out and someone was like, I have a box turtle, and I know you guys have lots of box turtles that I don't want anymore. And I was like, no, like we can't take it. And I would just say, like, here's a wildlife rehab center, or here's Schuylkill Valley Center that could use it as an education animal, but like we can't, because zoos also, like, there's lots of hoops and things they have to jump through and all these things they have for having an animal, so they can't just take your animal. Like, it's a lot of stuff. So please don't drop your animal off.
Hey, Annika, is that a thing? Because you've done a lot with reptiles and snakes ever since you were a little girl. Is that a thing where people buy these like alligators as babies or snakes and things, and then suddenly realize like, oh, this is going to get big, and then just like dump it? Is that an actual thing?
Yeah. So like you mentioned in the beginning, my dad and I used to do a reptile rescue and education program. And one of the most common ways we got reptiles donated or surrendered, whatever word you want to use, to us, was people calling us up and saying, I bought this pet. I bought it when it was like an inch, and now it's 20 feet and I don't know where to put it. Can you guys take it? So it was
Oh my
like a
God.
lot of people that didn't know. And I actually, when I interned at Philadelphia Zoo, we got to do a little project, all the interns, and you had to make an event. And so I made mine about reptile pet care, because reptiles are great pets. I'm a big advocate for reptile pets. If you get them responsibly and know how to care for them and buy a reptile that's appropriate for your expert level. And one of the exercises I did was I put out a tape measure, and there were pictures of all baby reptiles, and people had to say, like, here's the baby, how big do you think it's going to get? I had a Burmese python, and it looks really tiny. And so Burmese pythons, when they're babies, are like 10, 30 inches, which is still kind of big, but like not too much. And the amount of people that, like, maybe at most I saw stand at like the 5 foot mark, which like is big, but then when you
What's the
go
number?
21 feet. 21 feet and up to 200 pounds. So I think most people, like, when they buy like an alligator, hopefully, which you shouldn't be buying, I'm actually pretty sure that's illegal. But if you did, you probably know it's going to get big, but like snakes are pretty deceiving. Lizards can be pretty deceiving. And that's why also too, like, if you're buying it from a person, you should really look into who that person is, because they might be telling you that's, for everyone who knows, a ball python is a tiny little thing. It can grow to 4 or 5 feet. Great starter pet. If you want a starter snake, get a ball python. A lot of people buy baby Burmese pythons being told they're ball pythons. And that's why in Florida, there's a, what?
This is all very confusing, but
I know.
not.
But that's why in Florida, there's like a huge invasive species problem of Burmese pythons, because a lot of people have bought them and then they got too big and they said, well, it's Florida, it's hot and warm, and they let it go into the wild. And Burmese pythons can lay 50 to 100 eggs per year. So now Florida's
Now,
overrun.
people, right. And I think though, and I know we got a little bit off track. If you do find an alligator or crocodile or Burmese python in, your natural environment, I think what's the best thing? That is not something that you scoop up and take to a wildlife rehab center. I mean, I think you do the research, look for a reptile rescue, right? Or perhaps call the local authorities to say, hey, I saw this thing.
Yeah.
What do I do with it? But that's not just in case I've confused people by asking that question, that's not a wildlife rehab scenario, but it is an animal scenario where people are being, irresponsible or unkind.
Mm-hmm.
And it has serious ramifications.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's pretty much, I think if you're in a pinch, you can give them a call and say, like, I found this snake and I don't know what to do with it, but like, don't drop it off at the door. I think that's the other thing too. People need to understand about wildlife rehab centers is they are generally have a low budget. They generally have volunteers. They only have so many people that they can afford to pay what they pay. So like, maybe consider donating to them, maybe consider volunteering some of your time, but like, they are not disposal places for animals. They are people strapped and trying to do the hardest work and care for animals weeks on end with like little to no money. So like,
Yeah, and don't drop them off because you don't know what their hours are. And the worst thing for an injured animal is to leave them cold.
Yeah.
And so if you just drop the box off at the door and for whatever reason, that wildlife rehab center, the volunteers aren't showing up for a couple of hours, I mean, you could be dooming that animal to death unnecessarily. And it's wrong. They don't want boxes left at their doorstep. It's not good for the animal. It's just not good. It's not
And
right.
I think also too, for people to know, even if an animal isn't, maybe it doesn't have like broken bones, but even an animal just acting strange can be of concern. So like, I know, so a few years back, Dad and I were hanging out and our neighbor said, hey, I've got like an owl and he's been hanging out on this little porch I have and he hasn't flown anywhere. And at the time, Dad and I had reptiles. And so we had dead rats and we put 3 dead rats out for this great horned owl. And we're like, well, we'll see if he eats it. 4 hours later, didn't touch a single thing. It didn't move. And we're like, and so Dad knows a lot about wildlife. So he's like, okay, that's not good. So then we go and we get a bin and we're like, all right, we're going to catch this owl. And the owl flies off the bridge, but glides and just starts waddling on the ground. And that's a bad sign right there. If he's not flying away, he's not eating food, he's not flying away. And he's been sitting on this bridge supposedly for like 2-3 days straight. So already not a good sign. Fast forward, we catch the owl, all that stuff. We keep it like, the wildlife center was closed and luckily we could keep it overnight. And then we took it in the next day. and this is where wildlife rehab centers are really great. This owl actually had West Nile disease. And that's where wildlife rehab centers actually come in and catch a lot of animal-borne diseases and catch those outbreaks before, like, I don't know. I don't know what other
Before it
organization would
becomes,
catch them,
yeah,
but before
yeah,
it becomes a
that's good.
problem.
Yeah.
So even if an animal is just acting strange, probably like check in, because it, and I'm not even saying rabies strange, I'm saying like that owl just wasn't eating and we caught like a really serious disease for it.
And on conversely, right, if your cat comes back, or maybe somebody else's cat has caught a bird, and you manage to get the bird out of the cat's mouth alive. It could also be a dog, but dogs' teeth tend to be bigger. So cats, they have these little teeth, right? And so sometimes you rescue the bird, and the bird, people will just say, oh, and watch the bird fly away. And they'll be like, oh, it flew away, it's fine. That's actually not the case. In the saliva of a cat and a dog, it has bacteria. And when if the cat punctured the skin of the bird, that bacteria gets into the bird's body, and it will actually ultimately kill the bird if it doesn't get antibiotics. So while in that moment, the bird might fly away, what you've actually may have done is doomed that bird to death, because now that bacteria is going to get in its body and kill it over time. So if you ever have a bird, and I think probably other wildlife too, probably like baby rabbits and the like, that have a puncture, that have been caught by a cat or a dog, rescue them and go to the wildlife center, call them, or take them to the wildlife center, and tell them exactly what happened, because the animal might have a lot of energy, might seem like it's going to be okay, but the wildlife rehab center needs to know that they need to look for a puncture wound, because if they find it, they need to give it antibiotics, and they will give the animal proper care, proper food, proper medication, and then it will be able to heal and go away. So don't just, you rescue a bird from a cat or a dog or other wildlife, just because it looks like it can fly away or does fly away, that's not saving the bird's life. You've actually doomed it to death. So be mindful there too.
Yeah, I think that's great. And, too, sometimes like I called one time at my college house. Sometimes they do have the resources to come out to you. There was like at my home in college, there was a deer with a broken ankle, and I just gave them a call and was like, it's wandering around the neighborhood. And luckily they had resources to come, and they tranked it and took it back. And she was back a few weeks later hanging out in my yard. I was like,
I think
great.
more often than not, they don't, but
but
yeah. And what we didn't get to actually, right, and I know we're getting short on time, Annika, but there is this issue of speciesism, right?
Oh yeah.
Where actually one of the things that you will find in wildlife rehabilitation circles or discussions is there are those maybe scientific snobs, I don't know, who say, well, if it's a squirrel, if it's in this story that we pulled down, I'm trying to see, I'll find it. Anyway, that this one biologist said that he could see the value of rehabilitating a species such as a spotted owl or a goshawk, but figured that, or considered time was wasted working with red-tailed hawks, screech owls, and others whose populations are doing fine in a human altered landscape. And you'll see that people say, if it's a robin, or if it's a squirrel, or if it's a this, or if it's a that, it's not worthy of saving, and you shouldn't bother. And whether it's hit by a car or some other thing, just ignore it and leave it to suffer and die on the road. Most of the wildlife really every wildlife rehabilitator I have ever met does not subscribe to that mindset. It tends to be others in the scientific community. And personally, I mean, I guess I see the cowbirds too. They'll bring it up because cowbirds will put their eggs in the nests of other birds, and then it can have ramifications. So you'll hear that argument for cowbirds. But I think there is just something fundamentally flawed about saying to a person, you see an injured animal, walk away.
Yeah, no, I don't get it. Like there are definitely like every animal is important, and we know that we have endangered species lists and all that for a reason. But like, if you are a person and you see an injured animal, you don't look at it and go, well, there's 200,000 robins in my state, so whatever. Like, absolutely not. Pick it up, help it, save it. You'll feel better about yourself too. That's
I know, like
just
you
think
have
of
to
it
be
like adding to your
heartless.
karmic circle.
There is
Yeah.
something about that callous disregard. I also think it's really important. I wrote this book, I have this book manuscript. I have to someday get it published, but I call it, well, I don't, who cares what I call it. But one of the things that I talk about in there is, how it's really important. One of the things to do is nurture children's natural love of animals.
Yeah.
And if you see an injured animal, or you injure an animal with your car because you're driving too fast, one of the worst things that you could do is teach a child to think that going to the movies or getting to the store or getting to the appointment that they're going to is more important than taking care of that animal. First off, the child is going to have a natural inclination to want to help the animal. And you don't want to damp that down by saying, oh, but we're going to be late for the movie. And also it just sends a really bad message, right? The wildlife, they're worthy of our love and care. We as humans have so much adverse impact, whether it's car hits or habitat destruction or power lines or any number of things that we do that harms wildlife. We have a responsibility to take extra care, and it's really important to nurture and encourage children to exercise or act upon that natural loving care that they have, because then they'll grow up to be caring people.
Well, I was just gonna, like, to close it, round it all out in a nice way. Again, we do this cross-generational podcast, and I think that you saying that is like very literally what, like, I know it happened to you because you're a caring person, and like I know Oma cared about animals, but like the amount of times I've been in the car with you and there's been a turtle and you've swerved, or I remember you and dad like saving some baby ducks and they were in our home, or the amount of times we've just had an animal in a box. I mean, you and I have saved a lot of animals together too, and I am the first person to always be like, we gotta go back and with my friends, like, do this whole thing. And I think it has made me a more generally caring person, because I think when you are willing to care for something that can't help itself, and you are literally the only person that can do something, and you prioritize that, it makes you a better person too. So in full circle, living examples of mothers and, well, parents caring for their kids, and here we are.
Well, I think that's great message this week.
Great message this week. So look up your local wildlife rehab center and support them, give them a donation, volunteer your time, maybe send them some supplies, also find out what they need. Yeah, but I guess that's it. Oh,
I do want to say one thing. Sometimes people wonder, does a Green Amendment, constitutional environmental rights, will that provide care to flora and fauna, to wildlife? And I just want to say yes, because animals, wildlife, they're part of a healthy ecosystem, and they're part of a healthy environment. And actually a number of the Green Amendments are written to specifically mention flora, fauna, wildlife. So for anybody who's wondering, who knows that I'm the Green Amendment lady, yes, a Green Amendment can help provide additional needed protection to wildlife. Sorry about that. Greenamendment.org. Just had to slip that in, Annika. Oh, forthegenerations.org. Sorry, actually, greenamendment.org, forthegenerations.org. It all gets you to the website.
Well, there you go. So go support Green Amendments at forthegenerations.org. Follow Green Jeans at Green Jeans Pod on Instagram. Don't forget to share us with your friends and family. Give us a follow on Spotify, on YouTube, all that stuff. And yeah, I guess that's it for this week's episode. So until next